Look around. There is likely a silent graveyard of temporary identities somewhere in your home. That heavy keyboard choked with dust in the spare room. A collection of expensive cookbooks bought with such grand intentions, but never once opened. Or maybe it's a half-coded app sitting in a forgotten folder left to rot on your desktop. You see them. You feel it. That sharp, cold sting of shame. Our culture has plenty of unkind words for this. They call you unreliable. They say you lack staying power. Or they use that classic cutting dismissal. A jack of all trades, master of none. The story we tell ourselves is always the same. It starts with a surge, a rush. You inhale the novelty like a starving man at a feast, forgetting that real strength comes from the slow, difficult work of digestion. In that moment, you're convinced. You finally found it, your true calling. And then, the real work begins. The magic vanishes. You get restless. You walk away and start hunting for the next spark. After years of living in this loop, you start to believe the lie. You look at your history of half-finished goals. You wonder, why can't I just commit? What is fundamentally wrong with my character? But today, I want to show you a different narrative, one that is far more compassionate, one that is deeply rooted in biology. It is easy to assume that being a dabbler is a personality flaw, but in reality, you share the exact same neurological architecture as a world-class polymath. You possess what we call the discovery drive. You are wired with a massive, unrelenting appetite for newness. The gap between you and a master isn't a matter of soul. It isn't willpower. It is a matter of neurological strategy. It all comes down to the physical conditioning of one very specific circuit in your brain. But to tap into that power, we have to diagnose the glitch. The specific reason you check out too early. You know, I used to think I was just lazy too, but maybe we've just been reading the map wrong. Let's look at the mechanics. Think about how your mind processes fresh data. Scientists call this the epistemic drive, the biological urge to resolve the unknown. However, your brain functions on a slightly different frequency. It cares less about the long-term use of a skill. It cares about the velocity of discovery. Your nervous system is incredibly sensitive to what neuroscientists call reward prediction error. Imagine you pick up a new hobby, let's say digital illustration. Everything is vibrant. The progress is lightning fast. You go from a total amateur to someone who can draw a decent portrait in mere days. Why? Because the torrent of new information is astronomical. Your brain responds by drenching you in dopamine. It feels like a honeymoon. The world feels electric. But this is the trap. This is the beginner's high. Eventually, you hit the ceiling of easy wins. You grasp the logic. You understand the layers, the brushes, the theory. Suddenly, the novelty flatlines. The steep climb levels out into a featureless, blinding salt flat where the compass of excitement breaks. You are left alone. Alone with the silence of your own discipline. You have reached the plateau. For a brain wired like yours, that means the dopamine faucet is twisted shut instantly.
This is the crossroads. A master continues through this salt flat because they are hunting for subtle, hidden patterns. But a dabbler? A dabbler walks away. We call this laziness. We are wrong. True laziness is a lack of desire to move at all. You aren't refusing to move. You are refusing to move when the fuel tank is empty. Your brain is literally experiencing a dopamine crash.
Your subconscious calculates the effort. It looks at that final, difficult 20% of mastery and decides, the joy payout isn't worth the cost. So you quit. But let's have a moment of radical honesty here. A necessary reality check. Are you walking away because you have truly exhausted the subject? Or are you walking away because it stopped being easy? A dabbler retreats because they hit the first real wall. Their ego feels bruised. They seek an exit. That isn't a lack of interest. That is fear. And the reason you succumb to that fear is that a specific muscle in your prefrontal cortex is underdeveloped. We usually talk about grit as if it's some mystical quality of the spirit. You either have it or you don't. But modern neuroscience proves that persistence is a physical reality. It lives in a specific part of the brain called the Anterior Mid-Cingulate Cortex, the AMCC. Think of the AMCC as the heavy manual transmission of your consciousness. It is the only gear that works when the automatic engine of passion has stalled inside your skull. The research is clear. This region only activates when you do something you find difficult or unpleasant. If you love what you're doing, the AMCC stays dormant. But if you despise the task, if you want to quit, but you force yourself to stay, that is when the AMCC starts to fire. If you put weight on this muscle, it grows. If you avoid the weight, it withers. For the chronic dabbler, the AMCC is often in a state of atrophy. Every time you felt that first wave of boredom in the past, you dropped the weights. You walked out of the gym. So now, even a minor hurdle, a confusing chapter, or a bug in your code is enough to make your brain hit the abort button. It's like asking someone who has never walked a mile to suddenly finish a triathlon. Of course, you give up. This weakness isn't a moral failure. It is simply physiological atrophy. But here is the exciting part. This region of the brain is incredibly plastic. It can be built up at any point in your life. We see this in superagers, people in their 80s who stay as sharp as 20-year-olds. Their AMCCs are thick. They are robust. Why? Because they never stopped leaning into the struggle. They kept lifting the mental weight. So even if you're in your prime, your willpower muscle might actually be thinner than that of a 75-year-old who has spent a lifetime doing hard things. How do we repair this? We put your AMCC on a training program, but you must be patient. You don't start by trying to bench press 400 pounds. You'll just hurt yourself. You'll never come back. You need progressive overload. The strategy is simple. The 15% extension. The next time you are practicing your craft and you feel that overwhelming urge to close the laptop. That exact second, the dopamine vanishes and the frustration kicks in. Do not walk away. But don't try to grind for another 5 hours either. That's too much weight. The 15% push is the small, stubborn candle you light at the exact moment the darkness of boredom tries to blow out your momentum. Simply push for 15% more. If you were planning to practice the piano for 20 minutes and you want to quit after 5, just play for 3 more minutes, then stop. That tiny window, that small moment where you did what you did not want to do, is the rep. That is how you thicken the AMCC. It is a mechanical process. Over time, that neglected muscle will become strong enough to carry you across the longest, most boring plateaus in existence. That is how a dabbler transforms into a master. Now, I have to make a vital distinction. Some of you might be navigating life with ADHD, and for you, the roadmap is different. If you have ADHD, your dopamine receptors and executive functions operate on a different set of rules. Trying to brute force your way through a plateau using only the AMCC can lead to massive burnout. It leads to self-loathing. For the ADHD mind, internal grit isn't enough. You need an external, steel-framed exoskeleton. A frame to hold up a mind that is far too heavy with ideas to stand on its own legs. You need task visualization. Break the massive goal into tiny, tangible steps. Keep the finish line in sight. You need time anchoring. Use visual timers so you don't feel like you're drowning in a task that has no end. You need body doubling. Work in the presence of someone else. Borrow their neural regulation. And you need gamification. Create your own reward systems to replace the dopamine your brain isn't producing naturally. You have to engineer your surroundings to work with your biology. If you suspect your brain is wired this way, use these supports. Help your AMCC instead of just calling yourself lazy. There is one last obstacle: boredom intolerance. The reason the plateau feels like physical pain is that your baseline for excitement is way too high. We live in an era of supernormal stimuli, infinite scrolls, short-form videos, instant digital hits. These things saturate your brain with effortless dopamine. Compared to a 30-second viral clip, learning a language feels agonizingly slow. Your brain has been calibrated to high-intensity noise. So, when you try to enter the quiet, focused space of mastery, it feels like you're running out of oxygen. You have to treat this intolerance directly. You need a dopamine recalibration. This doesn't mean moving to a cave. It means practicing stimulus control. When you sit down to work, leave the phone in another room. Silence the background noise. Force yourself to sit with the boredom. We interpret boredom as a signal to quit. But in reality, boredom is the dark room where the film of your talent finally develops. If you turn the light of distraction on too early, you ruin the image forever. Boredom is the silence required for deep neural encoding. It is the sound of your brain shifting from consumption mode into creation mode. If you can turn down the volume of the world, the signal of your own progress will finally become audible again. So, here is my challenge for you. I want you to commit to a 6-month experiment. Choose one pursuit, just one. It doesn't have to be your career. It can be anything you've ever wanted to learn. And commit to staying with it for half a year. Forget about becoming the best in the world. The goal here is simply to survive the deliberate practice phase. Your objective is to reach the plateau, feel the dopamine drop, recognize the weakness in your AMCC, and then do the work regardless. Apply the 15% push. Train the muscle. Find your true baseline. It's funny, isn't it? We spend our lives running from boredom, never realizing that boredom is exactly where the gold is buried. Anyway, the choice is yours. Once you prove to yourself that you can navigate the dip, you will adopt a brand new identity. You will realize that dabbler was just a temporary label. You are actually an architect. And you are finally learning how to build a cathedral out of the scattered, jagged stones of every interest you've ever touched. Build that strength. You'll need it for what comes next.